Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Right to Read Initiative. My name is Dr. Kathryn Garforth from Garforth Education, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Linda Rhyne of Linda Rhyne Consulting, and today we're speaking about her journey, and we're going to learn about everything she's done and everything she does to help promote reading and literacy, both for students and for teachers. So thank you for joining me today, Linda. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. And you're based out of North Carolina.
That's right.
And so have you always been in North Carolina or?
Nope. I moved here to Charlotte in 2006 from Pennsylvania. So grew up most of my life in Pennsylvania, spent the very, very first few years of my life in New York. So yeah, northern kid at heart.
So let's go back to high school.
High school.
Nice to know, well, how you got to where you are today. In
Sure.
high school, did you know you wanted to be in education?
I absolutely did.
Yeah.
So it's funny, actually, I don't remember saying this, but my mom always tells me that we were having conversations about making, school decisions and where I wanted to go to college and what I wanted to do. And I apparently told her that I knew I wanted to be a teacher, partly because I knew I wanted to have a family and that felt more manageable for me to, potentially be a mom and an educator at the same time, which is just so interesting because looking back, I'm like, man, I really knew what I wanted to do, and so I knew that too, because I was an athlete. Mm-hmm. And I had spent a lot of time coaching for the coaches that I supported when they ran summer camps and things like that. I had babysat, kind of once I was old enough to do it. So I really spent a lot of time with younger children. And so I really figured out at an early age, that's where I wanted to be, was supporting how children learn.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So what did you do out of high school?
So out of high school, I went to Bloomsburg University, which is one of the state colleges in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And I majored in elementary education and early childhood education. They had a dual certificate with a minor in special education. Mm-hmm. And played my sport, played lacrosse too, while I was there, which I graduated in 4.5 years because of my lacrosse season. So I was able to do my student teaching outside of my sports season there. I graduated and kind of was like, I'm graduating and I want to teach first grade and I have no idea how to teach children how to read. I was like, wait a minute.
What did I do for the last 4.5 years?
Yes. And I'm pretty sure that that's what first grade teachers need to do based on my experience, So I stayed at Bloomsburg for another year. I got a master's in reading and worked there. I was a graduate assistant and worked in their program, and then was able to kind of earn that master's within another year, and then stayed on in that area as a substitute teacher for a little while before moving down to Charlotte. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wonderful. So when you did that certificate, so was it a certificate or a master's? Master's in reading. Mm-hmm. What did you look at?
Oh, so, guided reading was a major theme of the day. I definitely had textbooks that focused on that. Mm-hmm. And we spent a lot of time looking at fluency too, and working on Read Naturally and supporting that program in some of our local upper elementary and middle schools as well. And we did spend a lot of time looking at all components related to literacy. So while I might not have been as prepared as I am now for what we know children know how to read, I knew enough to be a little bit dangerous in a classroom. And so had a lot of opportunities to look at assessments, work with students one-on-one like have some tutoring opportunities to make some decisions based on the assessments, but certainly was underprepared for supporting the various needs in literacy in my classroom in the years to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you get into the classroom, and what's it like? What do you feel like as a new teacher in grade 1 when kids are so all over the place in their reading? Like, you'll have kids that are still working on their letter sounds, even maybe learning the alphabet, and then others that are, reading at a grade 4 level.
Yeah. So in first grade, when I started off teaching first grade, we were using Open Court, which turned into Imagine It. And luckily, that leaning on that curriculum did have some of the phonics and decoding components that children needed, but I was not strategic at all, right? So looking back, I knew enough about pulling students and working on small group instruction and trying to be smart about meeting their needs. I even have like a letter from a parent, right? Because their child became a reader that year, kind of thing. But I look back and I'm like, I don't know if that was me, like, what if it was just them in spite of me, right? It's a really scary feeling to be like, gosh, like, was it me? Did I have an impact? And so there are certainly some students that haunt me a little bit, in terms of wondering if someone ever figured out what they were missing that I missed, right? So in the very beginning, it was really difficult because you feel like you know what you're doing, right? And as a beginning teacher, I was a good beginning teacher. Like I knew what I was doing. My classroom management was fine. Like all of the things that are typically challenging for a new teacher, things went fine for me, right? But when I think back on where my instruction went wrong, there were certainly students that I was not reaching. Mm-hmm. And we kind of allowed for that and, lived in this place where it was like, okay, for some students to fail.
Yeah.
Right. Ugh. Which like, ugh.
And you know what? I've heard grade 1 teachers say that it's perfectly natural for students to learn how to read in grade 3. And I always hate hearing that, because it's not. First of all, learning to read isn't natural at all.
Right.
And second of all, if they're just learning in grade 3, there's something that's gone wrong along the way to have it that we haven't been alerted to it beforehand.
Yeah. And not at the fault of the student.
No,
right.
No. And it's not that they're lazy or not trying.
100%. 100%.
Which,
and by then, I mean, think about the impact on a child, right? Mm-hmm. That they know, I mean, they know early on who's got it and who doesn't, mm-hmm. right? So imagine being in school for 4 years knowing that you don't. Yeah. Right. And we wonder why children, like when I think about a child who is striving to become a reader at that age, mm-hmm. they are so incredible because of what they've done to adapt and figure out how to navigate school, knowing what they don't know. Yeah. Right. And I think that's what's so important, especially if you find yourself working with or supporting a student who's older, is making sure that they know how incredible they are. Yeah. To be where they are and have some of those adaptive skills and capabilities that they've figured out on their own, mm-hmm. in spite of not having the support that they deserved.
Yeah. And, we all want to have resilient kids and help support the real resiliency in our students. But I don't feel that failing to learn to read is a good way to build that resiliency in our students. No. I mean, you've got research that shows the impact of shame and illiteracy as a traumatic event
for children, right? So the idea that we as educators are potentially creating trauma for children when we're trying to be trauma responsive in classrooms, right? We certainly knowing that there's something we can do about it is so important for us to recognize.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So what was that moment for you that made you decide to get more, to learn more? Was there a student or students over time?
There's certainly multiple students that I can look back on and be like, gosh, like we didn't get it. We didn't get it for them. Right. And there's one student in particular that sticks out because he and I made a lot of growth and I was super proud of that, but it was within a leveled system. Right. So I look back and I'm like, what if I had figured it out for him sooner? Like what kind of impact might that have had on his life? Right. As his first grade teacher. So some of that happened for me a little bit later when I was a literacy coach and working with teachers. I had teachers that we were all just trying to kind of figure it out. And I was a part of the transition to Common Core state standards in leading that effort in my school. And at the time, our school district was implementing a balanced literacy approach. And we found ourselves in our school really kind of floundering and saying like, this is not, we're missing something, right? So we were kind of sneaking a little bit and hanging on to some of our older materials that we weren't ready to let go. We were like, we still need Imagine It Green Band. Like we still need something, you know? And then our district got a little bit more savvy to what was going on and had a colleague send me an article, the one about reading is more than just identifying the main idea, right? And that kind of kickstarted things for me in terms of we're missing something here, right? Like we think we're doing everything right, but something's missing. And so my book that like entered me into the world of science of reading stuff is the book Know Better, Do Better by David and Meredith Lieben, who have since become friends and colleagues, but and I'm like still starstruck when I get the chance to talk with them. But that book for me was so important. The way that they write that book is just so conversational and real and authentic, which I think was a really important stepping stone for me because it safely addresses some of the emotions that I think are tied up in all of this work. Yeah. Right. And because you hear their own journey and experience through that and kind of some of the decisions that they made to start impacting change for the students that they were serving at their school, you realize like, wait, we can do this, right? And we can do it in a quick enough manner that we can help children get caught up. And that like we have so much to learn. Right. And then when my school district made a shift to a curriculum that's better aligned to what we need for children, I'll never forget, there was a moment where the curriculum, support text, I like read it cover to cover. So that's how I like devour all of this stuff. Like it's a novel, you know? And there was a moment where it used the terms phonemes and graphemes. And I realized, I was like, I kind of know what those are. And I'm pretty sure none of my colleagues do. And none of the teachers that I supported did. And I thought, oh my gosh, like we don't even know some of the vocabulary that this curriculum is assuming we know, right? Like we have a lot of work to do. And so that for me was a tipping point because like, here I am, certified reading specialist, have a master's in reading, and look at what I don't know. Yeah. Right. That's a little bit embarrassing. Right. And so I had to kind of muddle through that and be like, take off the shame hat and start getting to work, right? Like start finding these texts, start getting connected to people, and the beautiful thing is that there's so much out there that is free resource and well-written and vetted that you can access and gain enough knowledge to be a little bit more dangerous than you were right last week. So yeah, that was a tipping point for me.
Right. And at what point did you decide to go on and get more formal training instead of just going off reading books and, content online, which is incredibly valuable and a great place to start.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're ready to take that next level and have the explicit teaching yourself needed to get to that next level, there is the necessity of not just DIY learning about the science of reading.
Yeah, we need our own explicit instruction to learn this, right? Like we need someone who's trained to be able to walk us through, like, what do we need to know? Give us the opportunity for a safe practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? 100%. So I had the opportunity to go through Orton-Gillingham training through MC.
Mm-hmm.
Through my local school district when I was actually going to be serving as a consultant for my school district.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, loved that it was so applicable. And it was during a time during the pandemic that I had the opportunity to get that training. And so I was practicing on my son who was in kindergarten. He was the person that I could practice with. And which went okay. Sometimes they don't love learning from mom, even when mom knows what she's doing.
Yes.
But that was a really great experience for me to be able to implement that and then be able to support that. So at the time, we were providing some online professional development to teachers in our local school district. And we were able to pair a lot of the approaches that we were using through Orton-Gillingham training. That's an approach being used to support tier 3 students who are not being served by our tier 1 or tier 2 support.
Mm-hmm.
And so our district is training teachers so that we have another source to use with students when that's not working. And so so that was kind of why that was happening. And then the other thing that's happened since then is North Carolina has pushed some legislation through that is funding LETRS training for all elementary educators in our state that are in public schools. And so locally, there's been cohorts of districts so locally, the district is finishing up the training. They are finishing up year 2, and there are others who are just finishing up year 1, depending on kind of which cohort the school district found themselves in across the state. And I am not in the public education sector anymore. And so I was sitting there like, jealous of all these people who are complaining about their 80 hours of work that they have to do for LETRS. I'm like, you guys don't understand what you're getting, right? Like, and somebody's paying for it. Like, this stuff is expensive. I looked into it, right? And so I was ready actually to shell out the money because I was like, this is a worthy investment, right? And if I'm going to be supporting people who have also received this training, then I need the same knowledge. I need to know what they're learning and the language that's being used to teach it. And so found out that there was an opportunity for me to apply to become a trainer for LETRS. And so that's what I'm in the process of that. I just got certified to train for volume 1. Mm-hmm. Which it's a really rigorous process in terms of even just getting past the interview process to be able to train as an independent consultant for them. And then there's multiple rounds of training and support to ensure that the messaging and the content that's being delivered, participants receive the same experience.
Mhm.
And then I'm getting ready to do volume 2. So some of that learning is still happening for me too.
Imagine if our students went through the same thing for reading, so that we had that guarantee that didn't matter what school, what district, what classroom you were in, you would get the same level of reading instruction appropriate to your needs, allowing you to know that every grade 1 would finish grade 1 at or above a certain standard.
That's my dream.
Yeah.
That's certainly my dream, right? And I know that sometimes curriculum can get a bad rap, right? We have this concept that teachers should be good teachers don't need a curriculum and should be developing their own lessons and things like that. And we certainly need responsive teaching, right? Because a curriculum will not serve every student's needs. But there is something to be said about an equitable approach that allows us to figure out, like, what are we trying to make sure we provide to all students? And then what access point does this student have? And how do we bridge that within this year, right? And if we don't have a curriculum to guide that, or discussions or touch points across states, schools, districts, all of those people, right, who are touching first grade students, how do you get to that dream without it, right? So for me, that's an important tool that we can lean on to be able to get to actualizing that dream for students.
Well, the thing that always bugs me is that you don't see the same opposition to a well-designed math curriculum. And numeracy is extremely important. I don't want to take away from the importance of numeracy at all, but learning to read is something that this child is going to be exposed to and ideally able to do pretty much every day for the rest of their life. They will be exposed to some form of text unless they're living off the grid. But they still need to be able to access it. And we can't have it so we're setting up so many students so they are dependent on assistive technology and other ways to access this information. Well, it's a definite good accommodation for those that are struggling. We can't just have that as a norm go-to and say, oh, okay, well, they're in grade 4, so we're just going to give them an e-reader or audiobooks. Because yes, it's going to help them access the material, but it's not going to improve their skills. And it's learning to read is a basic human right.
100%. So what'd you say?
Well, so you're doing the LETRS training now. And what do you do today? Like, what is your position today and how are you helping promote reading instruction?
So now I'm an independent consultant. I own my own company. And the main work that I do through that is working with schools and districts on how do we leverage having a system of coaches to support literacy improvement. Partly because I find that we have to create a safe environment for teachers to be doing this work. And especially, for example, in North Carolina, you have people who are receiving this training. It's really good knowledge, right? But what if they're going back to the classroom and the curriculum that supports them or that they're being required to teach is from a balanced literacy perspective? Who's helping them think through how to navigate that?
Yes.
unless they have a coaching support system that is also doing the same thinking.
Yep.
And two, we need folks who are coming from a coaching perspective, whether they serve as a supervisor or not, right? Sometimes ideally not, so that it's a little safer for them. But they need that feedback loop too, right? So if the goal that they have from some of this learning is to make sure that they're supporting students' phonemic awareness, for example, let's say they're a kindergarten teacher, right? They need somebody who's looking at that with them and helping them see whether their instruction is making those improvements. How are you measuring that? How are you going to be assessing that, right? So all of that is at play as a part of the work that I do. In helping coaches think about how are they creating an environment that sets teachers up for success in putting this into action. Because what would be too easy to do is to get this knowledge and fall right back into our previous habits, because that's where we're comfortable. It's what we know. Yeah. And it's what we've been trained to do, because that's all we've known to do. Right. So we need somebody who's going to push us a little bit and start to implement that change. And so that's the main thing that I do with my work. I'm also starting with a group of people, but I'm going to be helping to lead the Reading League North Carolina and bringing a chapter to our state. So really looking at how do we advance the mission of the Reading League, which is focused on the use, understanding, and awareness of the science of reading, right? So how can we as an organization continue the work that our state has already put forth in motion with this LETRS training, with having conversations around our state, getting those community stakeholders together. And that's what we want to do, is keep pushing this work forward, both by supporting with professional development, but also bringing teachers together so that they feel the support of a community of people who also want to make this happen. Yeah, it's hard to be, I don't know if you've seen the Lone Nut video, but the one where it's like a leadership video and they're at the music festival and there's one guy dancing music festival until a buddy comes and he has his first follower, right? And it's really hard to be the lone nut, right? So what if you're that person in your school and you need a community of people to kind of help you say, like, yeah, keep going, right? Like, you're doing it right. You've got it. And so that's the other piece of the work that we're trying to help do, is how do we create a community of folks who are ready to do this work? Because with that movement, we can get change happening with more than just small, groups of people.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, recognizing that, just going to the professional development isn't enough, because it is intensive. It is different seeing it in or being taught it, seeing it in the demonstration videos, maybe trying it with someone who's also doing the training with you. Then it's going to be taking it into your classroom where you don't have that support. So creating that scaffolded instruction, again, that we want for our students, for the teachers that we're expecting to provide it to them, and having those experts or thought leaders or coaches for them to go to and say, hey, yeah, like, I've been working on this activity. It's not quite right. What's the difference between a diphthong and a monophthong again?
Yeah.
Why do I need to know about those minimal pairs? I remember it being really important, but I don't remember why.
Yep.
Or can you take a look at this? Like, I'm looking at their spelling and their written work. I know there's something that I should be seeing, but I'm not. Can you help me with that?
Yep.
Creating that environment is allowing you to take that next step in your professional development. And it's really rewarding. I remember one of the first episodes, or the first few episodes that I did on the Right to Read initiative, I was speaking with a lone wolf teacher over the summer. I can't remember what book it was that she read about the science of reading. And she's like, okay, I'm going to do this year. She did screening and she's like, whoa, I think she was a grade 2 teacher. And, she was like, okay, grade 2 students, grade 2 curriculum. But then when she did the screening, she realized that, well, yes, they're grade 2 students, but they're at the kindergarten level in these areas. And so she was able to adapt her instruction, with the online community support. And I was talking about this time of the year with her, and she's like, I'd never go back. My students have come so farther than they ever have. And this wasn't a beginning teacher. This was more of a veteran teacher that'd been doing it for at least a decade. And so excited about the progress. And that's the thing. When we see teachers do this huge learning development, recognizing that the research is showing it's taking about 5 years to go from balanced literacy to structured literacy or reading science or whatever you want to call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we need to make sure they have that support along that process for success.
Yeah. They need to know that they're not alone
Mm-hmm.
in the work that they're doing.
Definitely.
Right. And especially, I think, various states are doing it differently, right? Like there's some that are doing it where it's an opt-in choice. Mm-hmm. And what if you're that person? What if you're the one person at your school who's opted into learning that, right? Like the person that you interviewed. Mm-hmm. Whereas for us, it's a very top-down approach, which brings its own challenges.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have people who are like, well, like I gotta do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need somebody who's going to kind of push you to see the value of it, right? And help celebrate those small wins that you see along the way too. I mean, that's the other piece that I think can be challenging in this transformation from one approach to another is decoding is hard.
Yes.
Right? Like, so until students kind of hit that decoding threshold where their brain is making sense of those patterns and they have enough spelling patterns under their belt, it's really hard until then. And so for teachers who have felt like their children were reading certain levels of books, right, at the end of kindergarten or partway through first grade, it can feel like you're backtracking a little bit. Until you understand the inherent difference between the texts that you're asking children to read, right? So I think that's the other part is you need someone who's going to help you celebrate what progress is happening and see it for what it is, right? Like, no, but look at what they're going to be able to do with this word knowledge now, right? Or look at how their writing is improved because of what they can spell. Like now we can read it. I see that in my own son. Mm-hmm. He did a year of full remote kindergarten. Yeah. Reading was a struggle. Reading was hard, right? And so he needed intervention support in first grade. He didn't want it from mom. Yeah. And so I had to back off of that a little bit, right? And there was one day he brought a book to me and he was like, Mom, I can read this. Right. And he, to this day, identifies himself as a reader because of that book. That he remembers that experience of like, this was the day I became a reader. Like, and don't we want that for every child? Right. Like we talk about that. We talk about wanting children to fall in love with reading, but they have to be able to do it in order to fall in love with it.
Well, and one thing I think we need to acknowledge is that the vast majority of teachers took to reading easily. And they were taught with a, potentially a balanced literacy, but more likely a whole language approach to reading. And they were able to learn how to read in spite of instruction. So they're going on this steep learning curve to learn about the phonemic awareness and the phonology and the phonics and the spelling patterns and the morphemes and the ways to build vocabulary and comprehension, because to them, It wasn't something they had to put a lot of effort into learning.
Yeah.
So recognizing that those teachers are going to take some time and they're going to have those aha moments like, so that's why it's spelled that way? Well, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Right? But being willing to invest that time, energy, and effort is a sacrifice.
It is. It is. But I think when we realize the outcomes
Mhm.
and potential from that investment, right? Like teachers will do that.
Oh, for sure. And another thing that they
Teachers
wouldn't.
they want, right? Like all of that for their students. And so I think it's just helping folks realize like this is what can happen as a result of making this shift.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for everything that you're doing. And I am
Likewise.
looking forward to our talk on Friday to learn more about your role as a literacy consultant and how you're being that coach for helping make the transition to schools.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk.
Take care, everyone.